Hi everybody, in this video I'll be talking about some writing rules and paraphrasing using APA 7th edition. Okay, we'll start off with some general recommendations or guidelines according to APA 7th edition, things that you will need to do as you're writing. So we'll start with abbreviations. So when you're using abbreviations, such as abbreviating Department of Mental Health as DMH, you need to introduce the full word and the abbreviation first. So you'll write the whole name first and then provide the abbreviation in parentheses. So you have an example there, the Department of Mental Health, and then parentheses DMH provides and blah, 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 blah. And then any other time you're going to use Department of Mental Health, you would only use DMH. So you would never go back to using Department of Mental Health fully written out. Okay. Another rule is not to include the abbreviation if you refer to it less than 3 times in your paper. So if you're only going to say Department of Mental Health once or twice, there's no sense in providing the abbreviation, and APA doesn't want you to. So only use it if you're going to use that again more than 3 times in your paper. So this gets useful when you're writing maybe like a mental health diagnosis, like major depressive disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, which you'll end up referring to multiple times in your paper. Using the abbreviation is helpful. Okay, another issue has to do with word choice. And so with word choice, some common mistakes are whether to use whether or if. So you should use if you're using an if-then statement. For example, if the client endorses suicidal ideation, then the clinician will complete a full suicide assessment. Okay, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the then in there, but the structure needs to be the same as if you were using an if-then statement. If you're not, then you're going to use whether. For example, the Beck Depression Inventory was administered to determine whether the client was experiencing symptoms of major depressive disorder. You're not going to say to determine if the client was experiencing symptoms of major depressive disorder because you don't have a then component to that statement. Another common one that I still have to think about when I'm writing is when to use while or since, and when to use although or because. So while and since are used only when referring to time. So since the 2000s, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas although and because are used when referring to concepts. So although research surrounding, et cetera, et cetera. It's common for me to see since research surrounding the use of self-help, but that's technically not correct because remember, since is for time. Another common one that is just, I think, a spelling issue is using then versus than. I think I have, there we go, an example here. So I'd rather be pissed off than pissed on indicates a sequence of events. What they want to use is than, meaning as opposed to. Okay. Lists. This can be a difficult one. Lists are common to use in writing with APA, and you want to use parallel lists. So I have an example. Cognitive behavioral therapy utilizes techniques including restructuring maladaptive cognitions, teaching relaxation strategies, and providing psychoeducation. So notice here that the verbs all end in ing, restructuring, teaching, and providing. That is an example of a parallel list. You don't want to use non-parallel lists, such as the one here, where I have techniques including cognitive restructuring, teaching relaxation strategies, and psychoeducation. So I don't have an ing verb before psychoeducation. I could fix this by just modifying some words. I could move, including restructuring cognitions, teaching relaxation strategies, and providing psychoeducation, for example. Okay, numbers. There's another rule that APA gives us with numbers. You want to spell out numbers if the number is the beginning of the sentence. This one makes sense, right? So 2 factors, if the beginning of the sentence is a number, like 2, then you would spell it out, TWO. Or if the number is less than 10. So in a sample of 4 countries, there are 5 different strategies, so something like that. You want to write it out. You want to use numerals, 1, 2, 3. If the number is greater than 10, so for example, I have 452 adolescents, you wouldn't write out the words 452 because it's greater than 10. Also, if the number is being used in a date, age, or unit of measurement or time. So when you're saying ages of your clients, like a 37-year-old female, you use the actual numerals. And if you're giving a date, you use the numerals. And the last rule is if you're writing an abstract, which you don't need to do for this class, but this is good to know for the future, you would use numerals in the abstract. Punctuation, these are common little errors. After you have a punctuation mark, you need one space, not two. So a common one is like at the end of the sentence, you'll have your period and then you'll do space, space and start your new sentence. No two spaces, just one, okay? Don't add useless commas. I remember my dad would say that he'd put a comma wherever it looks good. Don't do that. Commas are to be placed where there needs to be spacing or a break between sentences. So it's helpful to read your sentence aloud and see where those commas should fit. Now, I'm not a writing teacher, so I'm sure there are specific rules for this. Refer to writing people. Just know, don't just stick commas in there where they look good, okay? Punctuation marks go before the closing quotation mark. And I have an example here. This is another common error. If it's the end of the sentence, the period needs to go inside the quotation mark, not at the end. Punctuation marks go after in-text citations. And this is where it can get kind of confusing. If you're having to add in a parenthetical citation, like in that first bullet point, your period doesn't go inside the quotation, it goes at the end of that in-text citation. So I've given you the right way to do it and then two wrong ways to do it, okay? And then finally, IE and EG should always be followed by a comma in your writing. And so I have an example here. My favorite types of apples are red, and then I have E.G. comma, and then I give my examples. All right, so those are just some general tips. We'll get to some more other writing rules in a week or two with APA. So now let's look at paraphrasing. So why should you paraphrase? Well, paraphrasing is really a great way to show that you understand what you're reading. It's very easy to just quote a complex sentence or a phrasing in your paper, but that doesn't show that you understand what you're writing, and it doesn't actually flow very well in most cases in your writing. So as I've mentioned before, direct quotation is very rarely used with APA. So you want to paraphrase instead, putting it into your own words and showing that you do actually understand what you're writing. Don't use your quotations as a cop-out to not understand what you're actually writing and reading. It allows your incorporation of your notes and the outlines that you've used and all of that into your paper in a nice flowing way. And perhaps most importantly for this class and for your future writing, it avoids plagiarism, because unless you paraphrase something, everything needs to be directly quoted and cited. And then if you're directly quoting and citing everything, what did you write? Not much. Okay, so here's an example. If this is the original wording in the article, combined effects of medication and psychotherapy with an educational component are needed with individuals who develop depression and are aging with a disability. Okay, and that's the citation. If you were plagiarizing this, you would do this here. You're writing the exact same thing that they wrote, but you're just ignoring the quotations, like you're not writing your quotations in. This is plagiarism. This is not good. This is what will get you in trouble and probably give you a failing grade in your paper and can get you dropped from the class or the school. So don't do this. Problem areas, it's basically the exact same sentence. There are some minor differences, but it's exactly the same otherwise. And it doesn't show that you even know what this means. Like, can you actually put this into your own words? Do you know what they're talking about? Okay. So I've highlighted here all of the things that are the same, and it's the majority of the sentence. So not okay, just sticking your citation at the end doesn't change the fact that it's not paraphrased, it is plagiarized, not okay. Okay, so here's an example of a properly paraphrased. So remember, here's the same sentence. Okay? And we could paraphrase it like this. Research focuses on whether treatment that combines medication, psychotherapy, and education can be effective for reducing depression among older adults with a disability. This is different. It conveys the same meaning, but in my own words or the words of the person that this is adapted from. And it's not using any of the exact same phrasing. There is still a problem. What is it? It's not cited, so make sure to include your in-text citation. An error here, that period after disability does not belong there. Okay, so take that period out of there. You only need the period at the end of that in-text citation. Okay. Okay. I've included here on this slide and the next one, two different ways, two different activities that you could use to practice paraphrasing. So if you're wanting to practice it, you can go for that. but we're not going to do that here. I'm not going to read to you. So we'll finish with talking a little bit about brevity and writing clearly. Okay, I think there's a common misconception that you have to write big words and lots of words in order to convey that you're smart, or to convey that you know what you're talking about, and to make your papers longer to meet that page limit. This is also why I don't do like word limits or word minimums and page minimums. Some folks can be more concise and still very informative than others. So I don't want you to focus on having to write a lot or using big words to get an A. Like, that's not how that works. So keep things concise and to the point. Okay, so here's an example of how to make things more brief and to the point and concise. Okay. Some strategies for working on this: take a step back and ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? Okay, and then write it out the way you would say it, like if you were explaining it to me or to a friend or someone. After you've written out, you can go back and change things or make it sound more professional if you need to, but that will help you to avoid wordiness and run-on sentences, which are really common with writing in this class. And this, of course, gets easier with practice. So practice. You want to avoid passive voice. So instead of saying, the client was bitten by a dog, or suicidal ideation will be discussed with the client by the therapist, which just doesn't make any sense. You want to put the subject first, okay, and use active voice. You also want to avoid anthropomorphisms, which involve attributing human characteristics to something that's not human. So this is common, and I see this in this paper. In the following section, I will blah, 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 blah. This paper will explore blah, 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 blah. This part of the assessment will discuss blah, blah, blah. No, don't do that. Just don't tell me what you're going to do in the following section. Just do it. The paper is not exploring anything. You are. And the assessment doesn't discuss things. Okay, so be careful with that. Okay, once you've written and you've done your edits and you've done your wonderful paraphrasing and you've added your citations, please, 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 I can't stress this enough, read your work aloud. That is the best way to catch phrasing problems, errors in punctuation, run-on sentences in particular. If you're having to take multiple breaths in one sentence, that's a problem. This is also where you can catch the need for commas. So read your work aloud, make sure it makes sense. Make sure you have topic sentences and transition sentences. And the best way to do that is to read it aloud, okay? If you're finding that things are getting wordy, ask yourself, if I remove this sentence, would the paragraph still make sense? If the answer is yes, get rid of it. Use Park to have someone look at your paper. They're there for you, the Writing Center at Park, and they're great and helpful, and they're trained, and they can teach you a lot more about writing than I can. So definitely use them. They're there. It's a free resource for you. And then have someone else read your work. Get a buddy. Give them a Starbucks gift card to read your paper. Chances are they'll do it. And it's always nice to have another perspective and to have someone who can catch errors. Sometimes when you've looked at a paper for so long, it just all starts to like blur together and it sounds right to you, but it doesn't to somebody else, meaning it's not going to sound right to me. So have someone else read your work. Peer edits are great and helpful. Okay. All right. So that's it. Some general rules for writing. We'll be doing some peer editing in this class that can be helpful, but don't limit yourself to what we do in class. You can also take it upon yourself to peer edit your work with a peer at multiple times during the semester. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.